Hey everyone, thanks for joining us this week on our expert interview series. And this week I have someone super special here. And we're going to be talking about actually the design and flow of the office space. Now, we've been talking before about creating a really great patient experience. And part of that is not just about the marketing and sales and selling plans of care and so on, but it's actually delivering the experience of when someone first walks into your clinic. And this is a really big component to the overall success of your business. And I've got an absolute expert here, Carolyn. She's joining us to talk to us more about how we can create a perfect patient experience and environment in an office setting so that people really want to come in and, you're differentiating yourself from competition and so on. So I'm really excited to be able to kick this one off. It's going to be an awesome episode, and we've got lots of resources. So thanks so much for coming on. Carolyn, I'd love for you to kind of just tell everyone a little bit about yourself and kind of how you got started, because you've got a really unique story about how you got into this as well.
Yes, we didn't start out this way. It happened organically. Absolutely. So my name is Carolyn Bolt, and my husband and I own a company called Crossfields. And in 2010, 2011, we transferred into, instead of working on large corporate offices, I'm a commercial interior architect, and he's a commercial contractor. Instead of working on large corporate offices, we started to transition to helping specifically chiropractors and then growing into physical therapists and holistic medicine, et cetera. And the reason that we did it is because we were chiropractic and holistic medical patients, and we promoted it all the time. But we knew that the image that most people had of, this was 10, 12 years ago, most people had of chiropractors and holistic health was not what it needed to be. So it was considered kind of a downgrade for us to be an interior designer and to start work with because they were not, the space was not respected from the design community. In fact, we had designers say, "Are you sure you're going to do that? Their spaces are horrible." So we said, yes, they need us, because nobody will take them seriously unless their space represents professionalism and things of that sort. So we were working at Life University at the time, which is what got us involved in the chiropractic profession. But my daughter was healed of tonsillitis when she was 2 from chiropractic 30 something years ago. So we were patients already. Big picture is that we created an customized design steps for chiropractors and holistic health cares virtually all over the country to help elevate the profession so that you could save more lives. That's our mission.
Love it. Love it. And yeah, I think it's such an interesting thing of what you're doing, because, you experienced it firsthand of like the transformation experience, and then you're taking your knowledge and applying it to the industry. And I think that's a big thing that we cover a lot, is talking about, looking outside of the industry and getting other people's perspectives. So I'm excited for you to kind of share some of those things. So I know we were talking a little bit about, really the design of the business and why it's so important. And, a lot of the time when we're starting our practice or we've got it going for a period of time, we're thinking about, I got to get patients in, I've got to, sell plans of care, I got to hire people, I've got to buy tools and shockwave systems and all this other stuff. But we often forget about, what does the facility look like? And there's been a lot of people I've worked with who, struggled kind of with patients. And for a period of time, for about a year and a half, 2 years approximately, I was actually consulting and working in these clinics. And a couple of clinics I would go to, when I actually walked in the door, it was the first experience was like, well, this is why. Like, I remember thinking that at one point and thinking, well, this is why. The place looks terrible. It had like yellowing walls, and it was those, I hate those ceilings, the drop ceiling with like the foam kind of stuff, you know what I mean? And it had like leaking and bending in it. I was just like, oh man, this place looks terrible. Like, no wonder people, the guy's a good practitioner, but like, no wonder people don't want to come back or whatnot. So I'd love to get kick off by talking about, why the aesthetic and the setup is so important to the business and should really be considered as a part of your marketing and overall brand strategy.
Absolutely. Well, what you said was great, because we consider your office space is like the packaging around your whole practice. And it is your biggest expense, but it's also your biggest marketing expense. So it needs to match with the service that you're offering and the demographics that you're trying to attract. So it will attract and retain patients if done well. The other thing it does is that we talk a lot about, I don't want to forget the flow, because we definitely focus on form follows function, if you've heard that before. So it has to function well. It has to function well, or it's going to cost you money, because it's going to cost you money in energy. It's going to cost you money in time. It's going to cost you money in frustration for you not to have a good flow, not to have office spaces or the space that you're working in just the right size, et cetera. So when we do design, we do definitely function first. And there's a lot of people out there that focus on function also, and but when we think about function, we also think about the functional aspect of the vision that the person that walks into the space is going to have as they walk into their space. So that's where the form comes in. So the form is the three-dimensional element that's created from the first impression, what you see. So if you think about, I'm going to go back to, we combine healthcare design with retail design and hospitality design. So you think about retail design, retail is an attraction design. So you need that attraction. When someone walks into the space, walks into a retail environment, they immediately size up kind of just psychologically what they're going to expect to pay for things, what they're going to expect service-wise, what they're going to expect in a whole culture of environment. And then cultural design is like the hospitality. And that's when you want your patients, because very often in our practices, the patients come very often. So you want them to want to continue in their care plans with you and continue. So how do you create the culture for that? So I'm just going to use one example that when we started out in 2010 teaching classes at Life University before we ever started designing offices for them. But what we talked about is imagine that you walk into a Walmart, which is very purposely designed. It's not just happenstance, but it's very bright, and it matches the low-cost leader. It matches. You don't worry about what you wear. You don't worry about whether you don't expect to have good service. But Walmart makes a lot of money, so I don't want to I'm not discounting Walmart. They just do that on purpose. Then if you turn the other spectrum and you walk into a very high-end designer store, it's a totally opposite experience, right? So as a practitioner, what experience do you want your patients to have? It's somewhere in between. But what they have, what their first impression is very, very important to complementing the service that you're going to offer. Does that help?
Yeah, totally. And I think that's a big thing to consider is with the examples is like, one, you've got logistics of how you want people to move through, but also how you want people to feel. When you walk into a Walmart, it's meant for kind of like maximizing people to buy stuff and whatnot. In Canada, we have a thing called Canadian Tire. And Canadian Tire is like a master of orchestrating, like you go in for one thing and buy 50, because that's just, kind of how they do. But then you go into like a higher end store and the feels different. Like the lighting is less intense. It makes you feel more welcome. And also the staff. So like if you've got staffing, does it make it warm and inviting for someone to come in, or does it feel like kind of, resistant? And I'm curious to kind of, maybe get into some of those details about like using the right furnitures and how things should be lined out. Cause there's a lot of clinics I've been at that, the office desk is like this high and you like kind of looking over it and it just feels like a weird relationship as well. So,
we can talk about all those kind of details, but yeah, there's a psychology when you walk into the space, and there's principles of design and there's details of design, but it's I could spend hours speaking about all of that, but, just understanding that when all of those things do impact you, your environment does change your mentality when you're in it. And it can be, and you want it to be intentional. that's the biggest thing, is that what you were saying, you're so focused on getting your practice open, you're intentional about so many other things, and hiring good staff is huge. I mean, you can have the best, wonderful space in the world, but if you have a nasty person behind your front desk, that's going to, create just a disconnect between everything. So you need everything to synergize together. So we've seen a lot of practices, and probably because the practice, they're hiring consultants to help them get better. And that's kind of what we do. We come in and help this one area get better. So ask me some more questions, because that's where it comes from.
Yeah, totally. And I guess like, what's sort of like the first thing like you would start? So like, what's sort of like the first kind of section that you're looking at to evaluate? Like, I know you've got a couple different, things you're looking at, but what's sort of like a couple main things that people can look away and they're like glaringly obvious that you can kind of almost change quickly?
Okay, so we do multiple different ways of working with people, but let's focus for a minute on the existing practice that needs to just consider what do I need to do to my existing practice? Because obviously we also work with clients that are opening new practices or remodeling, major remodels and expansions, and because we're architects and designers. Yeah. But from the initial standpoint, we actually wrote a book, and I'm going to pull out and part of those free resources that we actually call it the designer checklist. And it's the 5 things that we would do first when we would walk into a space. The first thing is, we've already talked about it, the perception, just making sure your perception is what it needs to be. But the very first thing we would say is, don't do it yourself. Find someone else that has not been in your space on a regular basis, that you can trust to be honest, unbiased and honest with you, to walk into your space and give you, what's their first impression? What is the first impression when they walk in the space? Because you can never make another first impression. You can never wipe that first impression away. So the first thing you need to do is an overall honest assessment from someone else, which is what a designer would do, right?
I think that is important. I speak from experience. Like, what I think is cool or looks good is not, but I can explain to someone who knows what they're actually doing. They can take your ideas and really like put them into something that's going to work. Because sometimes I've done stuff and it was just a bad idea. It didn't work logistically, or it clashed or whatever. So totally I speak from experience there.
Yeah. What you're talking about is actually having a design consultant. What I'm talking about is actually having someone that would be in the demographics of your potential patient, just be honest with you about how they feel in the space. How do they feel? What do they see? Et cetera. So that's number one. So, but they may be honest with you and say, that paint color you painted is way too bright. They may be honest with you, whatever that it is. So that's one. The other one, the second one is that the biggest thing is it clean and organized? You would be surprised at how many offices are just not clean and organized. They've got clutter everywhere. They've got paraphernalia. Every new idea of the week is displayed on their front desk. Nobody sees it. It's just too much. They've got the walls lined with, taped up posters, and, we're getting close to Walmart now, where if you walk in Walmart, not negative to Walmart, but you're lowering your value when you do that, because nothing becomes important. You have nothing to focus on anymore. So cleaning up the clutter on the front desk, cleaning the bathrooms clean? It is nothing. There's nothing more repulsive to, and a lot of you females are your main, your main demographic, or the female actually brings in the rest of the family demographics. The bathrooms are used. So your bathroom's clean, or the grout dirty, all of those kind of things. So just some really basic spring cleaning, letting go of clutter. If any of you guys know about, the idea of making sure that everything is clean and uncluttered. What's that woman's name that does that? She has some great things out there that talks about helping you unclutter spaces. So there's lots of resources for that. So that's number two. Number three is, this kind of goes with the clean and organized, but are things worn out? So are your adjusting tables or your PT tables, are they ripped? Are they, you'd be surprised how many, have duct tape on them because they've got a rip in them. So that is very, very repulsive to a new patient. It's just makes you feel like, you're cheap, or you don't care. So it doesn't show any pride. If you think about, years ago, there were books written called Dress for Success. And I know that idea is not where it used to be, where you were always in a business suit, but it's that idea that when you do put on a business suit to go to that wedding, or you carry yourself differently. Well, it's the same idea of your office. Is it worn out? Is it, the next thing is it dated? So one of the things that I talk about with dated, and that may be something that you can't see, is that there is no forever style. You just have to accept that. Things will date every 7 years. That's it. There's your colors change, styles change, everything changes every 7 years. It's a cycle. You may be able to get something that'll go about 10 years if you stay really classic, but if you do something that's very trendy, it's going to date even faster. So the 7-year average of dating. Now, you can do trendy stuff, but you have to know that you're going to have to change it. Put it into your budget to change it every 7 years. So are your things dated? And I'm going to say this with all due respect. In fact, I get catalogs all the time of inexpensive furniture. Most inexpensive furniture is already dated. Okay, so you have to be careful, especially waiting chairs and things of that sort, that you don't just go with the most, the cheapest thing you can get. So there's places that you want to put things that have style, such as your chairs and your front desk and your artwork. And those things are going to date, and you have to be able to change them. So that's the fourth one. And then the last one, you already spoke about it, is look at your lighting. So when we do offices that are, especially startup offices, the two biggest things we use are lighting and color. You can do a lot with color, just paint on the walls in strategic spots, etc. But lighting, so there's so much psychology that happens with lighting, and you spoke about it. When you walk in and there's a wash of light over you, it creates a different energy when then there's changes in the light above you. So you have to be very intentional about that. So those are the things. But the basic thing about lighting is, are the light, even if you have 2x4 fluorescent, are all the light bulbs the same color, and are the lenses dirty? You'd be surprised how simplistic that would clean up your space. So does that help? And all of that's actually documented in one of our free resources as a checklist that you can use. So
yeah, totally. And I think that's the big thing. It's about creating intent, because like everything we do with our advertising, our sales process, consultations, and so on is about intent. And the space that we have can be such a huge, huge component. So I'd love to kind of like talk a little bit more about some of your experiences that you've seen when you went in and like actually changed some stuff in terms of like, how it improves like employees. Even like a lot of things we don't think about is like, do employees feel good in the space as well? If you got someone who's upset at the front desk because there's bad lighting and, they're uncomfortable chairs and that kind of stuff, like that's going to affect them. The same with patients. Like, are they sitting on, old chairs? Like I remember going into one chiropractor's office and it was for an animal, and like the chairs were like these crappy like chairs, and one of them was like split. And I remember putting my hand down and getting like pinched in the side of the chair. So it's just small things like that. I'd love to talk a little bit more about, how big of an impact it really can make, and sort of some of the things that you find that are really important, like what kind of desk do you generally recommend? Or I know it's obviously going to be different from, person to person and clinic to clinic, but there's probably some basic guidelines. Chairs for sure, you definitely don't want to have bad. I would imagine, right?
No. So chairs do two things. One, they create a design element. when you're talking about two different kinds of chairs. Waiting chairs are part of your design element. The chairs that the people sit in to work in, we're in a physical industry, right? We're all about ergonomics. And you're right. Some people buy the cheapest chairs for their staff that are uncomfortable, et cetera. So that's another story, because that's not as much about style. But yeah, what you do when you talk about intentionality, when you take a focus on your space and you start to work on making it better, that does raise the level of patients that will come to you. And I do have there's actually a testimony on our website. We have a chiropractor that he bought a clinic, and he did what he could to make the clinic look better with paint, and he was right out of school, et cetera. And he did what he could. But when he'd been about 5 to 7 years in business, and he'd gotten profitable, and he opened up a new space. And what he said is, in the first week, he'd been part of all these networking groups, right? Mm-hmm. In the first week, he had 3 or 4 people that he'd known for 4 years in his networking group now decide that they're going to come in. Bankers, lawyers, you know what I'm saying? Because now his space represented them. It represented what they would be willing to go to and what they were. So, a lot of our practices also work in a cash-based model, right? Mm-hmm. And so in a cash-based model, you've got to know your demographics, right? But a cash-based model is going to have to appeal differently than a PT model. A PI model. A PI model still needs to be clean, because a lot of PI, you want your patients to continue to come, because you can make them even better than that insurance is going to let them be. So does that help? I could go on.
Yeah, totally. I think that's the big thing that I want to talk a little bit about is how you can changing the design, the lighting, or just being intentional with the equipment that you have in there can have a higher quality or caliber of people. Exactly. And it does actually start to attract the right people. And, we've got one example in Canada is we've got like a Tim Hortons, which is like a run-of-the-mill high volume coffee shop. Right. Like a Walmart of coffee shops, and you got Starbucks. Well, the people we would always see that would go are slightly different, kind of more, not generalizing, so to speak, but like, people who are more working class, that they're kind of like going to the Tim Hortons than the lawyers and executives and, financial advisors and so on are the ones that were going to Starbucks. It's exactly. More of the experience that Starbucks is creating for people, rather than sort of the in or out discount sort of thing. And people will pay more money to go there because they have more amenities, and it's more of a look and how they feel, and how people feel is super important, right?
Right. Well, I would just share something with you, because the Tim Hortons have a place. You know what I'm saying? They do have a place, and we'll work with chiropractors and holistic doctors that are in a big city. Like I've got one example of a chiropractor we've done in multiple locations. Well, his Midtown office has a whole different level, Midtown being very close to Atlanta, very high end. Most people they're either single or they don't have children yet, or they're empty nesters, et cetera, but higher dollar for everything, more closer to the inside of the city. So that whole space has a whole different feel to it, has a whole different finish level to it than his one that we just opened in Beaufort, South Carolina, which is a more rural area. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of near the coast, but it still has that little area is attracting the rurals as much as it is the coast. So it's a different feel. We couldn't put as much money into it because we didn't want to outclass the people that were coming into it. So you have to design to the demographics that you're trying to attract, and what that looks like. That doesn't negate that it's still not good design. You know what I'm saying? It still needs to be well lit. It still needs to flow well. It needs to be intentional. I love the word that you said, intentional.
Yeah, totally. I think that's a big thing to cover, especially because a lot of the people, are doing cash-based, like who are kind of listening to this, doing cash-based, or they want to appeal to like more niche. So understanding kind of like what that is. And yeah, not necessarily if you are doing a higher volume or you're attracting different type of, niche or maybe less market sophisticated in terms of some of the services, you're kind of more generalized. It works on both ways. People also don't want to go to like the high end, restaurant, so to speak, because they won't go there. They automatically assume that you can kind of not help them. So it is important to make sure.
I do want to say one thing because I kind of skipped it. We've seen, we can't document it exactly, but from what we've told, we've seen people's practices raised about 20% in dollar volume when they update their spaces. We don't know if that's just because the space is, cleaner, organized, whatever. We don't know exactly what it is. We think it's a combination who they're attracting, but it does elevate the staff and the doctor. It does elevate their mindset, and it does bring them to it's like getting a new wardrobe. It's just, and it fits the new wardrobe and it fits well. It just elevates the whole thing. So we don't know which of it. It's all psychological. It's hard to put a number on it like you would in a spreadsheet, but it's a psychological change that happens.
It sounds like kind of almost like a sense of pride. Like when, you cleaned your car or you got someone coming over, it's like trying to clean up all of the stuff and keep organized and that kind of stuff. So it totally makes sense. You got a sense of pride and you want to feel like that because then people are going to be happier and so on as well. So, yeah. And I'd like to talk a little bit and have your insight in terms of like the flow, because I know that that's a big important aspect and really thinking about how do you want people to feel, but also like the flow for logistics of patients coming in, whether you're a higher volume clinic or a lower volume clinic, like rooms, like how it works and making sure that staffing and all that kind of stuff works as well. So what are some things that you found that you kind of look into to manage from that aspect?
Let me see if I can go backwards. When we talk about function, the first thing we want to talk about, and this, the most idealistic way to set up good flow is with a space that doesn't have anything in it, as opposed to trying to fix something that's already there. Although we do that a lot too. We'll work with doctors on here's what's happening. Sometimes they add a service, sometimes some service that they thought they were going to have didn't work out the way they wanted, but they wanted to expand something else, that change. Mm-hmm. A lot of them, one thing that happens a lot is people buy existing clinics and they're already built out, but they're built out for a totally different model than their model, or, I'm saying that happens a lot. So when we talk about flow, the first thing we do is we look at, we get totally out of the space and we talk about what do you really need? What do you really, really need? So we start with what's your business? What spaces do you need in your office for your business plan to work? And we talk about what's inside each space, how big they should be, whether it's a closed space or an open, PT area or whatever. What are you trying to get in there? What equipment are you trying to get in there? Are you going to have enough flow around the tables and around the equipment to work? Because if everything's really close together, it's going to impede your flow. So we very much focus on the inside out, looking at all the different spaces. Okay. So, and then that totals up a square footage amount. So one of the things that can impede flow is you're trying to cram too much into too small a space. And that unfortunately is a problem, especially as a client, as someone grows. So one of the things, we've also written another book called Your 5 Biggest Mistakes. And one of the things is it's very difficult to design a space today and have it grow into your next 5 and 10-year plan without getting too much space now. So how do you do that well? And how do you create flexibility in the space? So that's one of the things we work with clients on before we start. Then once you know those little blocks, it becomes like a puzzle of how you want to flow. And every practitioner functions a little bit differently. But we see in a typical office, there's 3 different flows. You have a new patient flow, you have an existing patient flow, and then you have the staff flow. So we need to understand from the practitioner where that new patient needs to go in and out of the space so that they don't bottleneck the rest of it. We need to understand where the existing patients flow and where the staff needs to flow. So all of those things kind of come together. So there's not a formula. It's more of an interview type process of going through it to come up with where the things flow. Does that help? I know that that's not a good answer. That's not I can apply this right now answer.
It makes sense. And I've talked to a lot of people where they get in the mindset that, well, I can get more people in here. And sometimes, they should probably only have 3 rooms, but then they, try to get a 4th one in there and then the room's too small. And then part of it is, the patient may be okay, but the practitioner can't do the stuff that they're doing. So I've been in a couple clinics and I've talked to practitioners where, they literally have to move, ask the client to move or patient to move. So then you can be creating a bit of a negative experience when, hey, can you slide over this way and move the table? I've seen this happen before as well. So yes. I think it's important to think about those aspects about how people are actually going to be functioning and working in the environment. Because if, you don't really consider that, then obviously your staff can end up being problematic. And I've seen that happen where people have quit working places. Partly it was bad management and stuff as well, but just not a really good space that they're really proud of and feeling like they're happy, and it can wear people down over time, right?
It can. I have lots of stories, but you're exactly right. We've worked with doctors that insist that they can work in an adjusting room that's only 6 feet wide, period. And we're like, you know what? You don't even realize it, but we do feel like that. You need another foot or so because it is slowing you down. Now, unless you just work on one side of the table all the time, which there's always the ones that do work. But you're exactly right. They just keep trying to inch more spaces into this box, and it starts to impede everything else that's already in there. So it's just working through it. The other thing is narrow hallways. So we all of our spaces that we design, we work toward giving them 5-foot hallway. And what that does, now that's not necessarily required by code for the entire hallway to be 5 feet, but the areas around doorways need to be close to that for wheelchair accessibility. But what happens in a 5-foot hallway is you could have 2 people pass without ever thinking about it. It's that easy. If it gets much narrower than that, then you have one person stopping while the other person, you know what I'm saying? You don't even think about the seconds that's taking off, or the please excuse me kind of stuff that's happening, especially with patients and stuff. So narrow hallways, bottleneck doorways, too many things coming together. And everyone kind of gather near a checkout very much on purpose. And there's no space there. So it keeps anyone from flowing through the next way. So there's some definitely hot spots of potential bottleneck.
Totally. And I know we kind of chatted a little bit about, when someone's starting to think about hey, maybe I need to start considering this, or I've got inefficiencies in my practice, and or maybe some people are starting. I know there's a couple of clients that I'm working with now that are going into newer places. What's sort of kind of the starting point? If someone, I guess maybe we'll take someone who's got a practice already. What are some things that they can kind of think about if they're thinking, well, how do I know? I know going through kind of that checklist and sort of getting some help, but what are some things that they can do to start maybe making a mental note of and in terms of almost prioritizing what they should be going with it?
Well, this is when I would love to show you our website. Could I do that real quick?
Yeah, totally. You can share your screen.
Yeah. So let me.
Because I know you've got a lot of different examples and stuff too.
Yeah, I do. So let's see what I'm going to share here. Okay. So I know Brad will give you a link to our website, but this is our website. And what I was saying earlier is that we started out by teaching chiropractors on the impact their office environment has on their success, because it does. It's directly related to your success. So what we have on this website under resources are lots of free downloads, which we're going to give you a special link just for that. And then we also have down here at the bottom, resources just on planning your office. So we do work, if I had to say this, we do work with pretty much two different paths. We work with the one that wants to do an upfit to their existing office. They either want to do we call it a paint and powder refresh finish work, or they really need to rework and do some renovations on the inside of an existing office. And then we work with those that are either getting a brand new office or adding an expansion to their existing office. So we're going to speak right now. We've been speaking kind of to the upfit and the facelift, but let's talk about the ones that are doing an expansion or even need to rethink their flow. So this is what we do first. And I was telling to you earlier, we go through a process of establishing how much space you actually need. Let me get this off of here. And I'm going to give you this resources. This is a how-to. This is what I teach the students at schools. You start with a list of your spaces. What are you trying to do? And how big do each one of these things need to be? And then you end up with a spreadsheet just to look at your square footage. Because I don't want to say the biggest, I keep saying the biggest thing, but one of the big things that happen over and over, and pretty much over and over and over again, is that you want to cram way too much into the space that you have. And you already said it, you start compromising on those spaces instead of, it's like getting creative on how can I multi-purpose spaces. Or what we suggest is you do this before you ever go find a space, so that you go into that space knowing that it's going to work for you. Okay, so, and I'll show you how we do this, because we do this with our clients, but we also tell you how we do it here. So that's the first one. The next one is, you were talking about, is then we start to look at the flow. So this is an article just determining your best flow, okay? And it's our thought process behind how do you want to flow and how do you want to work through the space. So that's the two big ones that you have to have before you ever start to lay out your space and lay out your floor plan. When you get to, so those two have to be established. We call that our step one, we call that discovery. And in discovery mode, and I'm going to show you our steps. We have 6 steps that we go through on our design process. But in step number 1, it's called discovery, and we're discovering how much space you need. And then this is also where you start to develop your image. So we have you pull together inspiration pictures that give the idea of what you want your space to look like, which you can do also. And there's a link somewhere on here on how to build that. Then from there, then that's when we start to do the space plan to put everything together. But we don't start doing a space plan until we know that the square footage on this spreadsheet matches up with the square footage available in the space. It just, we're set up for failure if we don't. And that's where a lot of those ideas and compromises happen. Does that help you understand?
Yeah, totally. I think that's big, because sometimes we'll look at one, like everything needs to go together too, right? And match from a size standpoint. You don't want something that's not in there good enough and whatnot.
Yeah. Every day. So I'll show you this real quick and then we can skip to another question. But this is our process. So that's what I was telling you about step number 1. We work with you to discover vision and requirement, but I'm going to give you links so that those that really want to try to do it themselves kind of learn what we do, okay? Or understand what we do. And then we tell you after you've done step 1, then you go search for space. There is a compromise, right? Sometimes you find the perfect space and you have to figure out how you're going to fit into it, you know? Or we have doctors come to us and say, I'm doubling my space, but you're tripling everything you want to put in it. You know, so you have a lot of things that have to be thought through. And I don't care how experienced you are. I have never yet had a chiropractor come to us that's had more than enough space that he hasn't already figured out what he wants to do with it. You know, if he does have more than enough space, he's putting a gym in it or he's doing something else. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
He's already, or he's going to lease it out. But he ends up with, 500 square feet to lease out instead of 1,500 to lease out. Do you follow what I'm saying?
Totally.
It's always more than, it's bigger than we think it is. Then we have, you search for space. Then step number two is where we go through the process of doing a floor plan and design direction. So this is where you actually start taking those boxes of all your little spaces and looking how they're going to flow together. And it has to flow like we've been talking about, and starting to stop all the bottlenecks. Then that'll give you a soft budget. And then from there, you actually, and this is something that, we do, and do it very consultatively, but that can be done. We have floor plans that are available that people can look at. We have floor plans you can buy if you want to look at ways that they've been done by other patients. So it depends on where you are, if you're more of a do-it-yourself or not, or if you have the landlord's architect can do that. We just do it every day with lots of doctors like yourself. So we work more as that consultative mode. So step number 3 is where we actually create more of the architectural drawings, which you're expected to see in an architecture. Step number 4 is where we do more of the decorating. Step number 5 is where we turn it into permits. And step number 6 is quality control. So that's our whole steps. Does that help?
Yeah, I think the visual is definitely awesome. We'll make sure we drop the link below so that people can kind of look through it. And I really encourage people to take a look at this and take it and be responsible, because it really is a big aspect. I know, when I was looking out for a clinic gym that I was launching, it needed to have a good build out, and we needed to invest some money into it to make it fit right and feel right. Because there was a lot of places I worked at doing consulting where people were very unhappy with the overall experience, and people did complain about it. And there was other places that were really good. So it's something that you definitely want to factor in when you are opening a business. Don't just think about the low budget of what space can I get and all that kind of stuff. Think about how can I actually create this to make it something that I'm proud of? You don't want the example where, new clothes or throwing things away quickly before someone comes over. You want to have something that you can be proud of, that you can show and display, and people will go in there and say, hey, this is a cool place. This feels good. Staff are proud to be there, and it's not sort of an eyesore, so to speak. So, this is something that should be included in terms of your marketing spend when you are opening a clinic. And even if you're renting space or you don't necessarily own it, there's lots of things where landlords will do leasehold upgrades and that kind of stuff when you're taking over and whatnot. But it's, obviously an important aspect to cover, right?
All of this is focused on the interior of the space. We do full buildings, but most people are actually moving into something that they're leasing or that they're buying a condo or something. But I'm saying that because your first impression starts at the curb. It starts at the curb. So it's just like real estate. What is the curb appeal? And then the interior is just like staging. So I would just use an example of anyone that's ever sold a home. I know the home market at this moment is crazy, so it doesn't take much to sell a home, at least here in the States. But when, if you want to make your home more presentable and sellable, there are people that come in and actually clean it out, declutter it, and stage it, and just use your own stuff to make it look better, and it sells so much faster. So it's that first impression again that we're talking about. But as you're considering looking at spaces, what I'm trying to say is consider the outside, that you're walking into also, because it's going to, if the outside is horrible and you walk into a beautiful space, you've already kind of dirtied the windows before you get in there.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, we didn't really touch too much on that, but the signage and all that other stuff needs to, be congruent in terms of what it looks like outside as well, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I want to show you one thing that we've got that we created, and this is for the person that is a do-it-yourselfer but needs a design help.
Imagine having a space that's an asset for your business.
I'm going to stop the video. But what we did, because we did get a little slow over COVID, and the designers kept designing. So we designed 8 different, I know I showed you this, Brad, 8 different I'm going to call them styles. And these are all the exact same office, but you can see, I want to show you this because you can see how each one of these has a different feel to it. It's exactly the same office. Okay, it's exactly the same lobby, exactly the same layout. It just has been designed differently. So with each one of these, let's just say you are going into a market that you need to really appeal to an older market or a traditional market, or whatever it is that you need, but you like this style. So if you click on here, I'm telling you to use this for your own, or you can purchase it from us too. But this is the elements. So what this would say about your practice, it's established, conservative, tried and tested, time honored, sophisticated, dignified. So if you think about the words of what you want your practice to say to your demographics, it's just like your logo. It's just like any other thing you're branding. What are you trying to say? Your space needs to match to that. And then what kind of offices it appeals to. So what this is a booklet that's been put together with lots of instructions, all the shopping lists for finishes, lighting, furniture, etc., and a box of samples for all the things. So the goal here is to decorate. It's the decorating part of your space, right? To decorate your space without a designer. It's all done for you. So if that's appealing to any of you, we are giving a discount to everyone in your membership. And then the other thing to look at is just in our resources. I think I showed you here. Where are we? We've got free floor plans. We do have a library of custom floor plans that can be purchased. So we're also given a discount for that. And then these are all the free checklists, et cetera. And also we have another one that we call our new office checklist, which will come in the mega bundle. And it was written for our students specifically, but it basically breaks down all the things you need to do to get an office open. And it integrates it into the other things you need to do besides just your office. When you need to do marketing, when you need to have, when you need to order, when you need to start getting getting your staff, et cetera. So it's a timeline of that. So there's a lot of resources. Like I said, a lot of this stuff was created before we started doing design, but we do design all over the country. And we do it all through the internet. And check out our portfolio. We don't design for us. We design for our doctors. So does that help?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah?
Yeah, love it. I'll make sure I drop the links below, and we can get people those resources. So if they're looking to, upgrade and whatnot, they're going to be able to get a little bit more insight in terms of like the starting point and whatnot. And then you've got the checklist as well to be able to help people. So either way, I'd encourage everyone to, make sure, check your guys' resources out, make sure you go through, in taking an actual look at investing in the business and making sure you're creating a good experience. And at the very least, stopping and saying, well, how do I feel about this? And I like the one point you said is even just asking patients. Like, I'm a big fan of asking patients, well, how are you feeling about stuff? What's it like? And just asking them, like, how do you feel about the space? And see, like, I think that's one big takeaway, just simply that, takes no time at all, but just getting some actual feedback from people and seeing, like, how do they feel? Do they feel dated? Does it, we could kind of don't give a good opinion because we are, in the space and we sort of adapt to it, but
we adapt to it and we don't see it anymore. It's amazing. It is amazing. So yeah, that's all what it's all about.
Awesome.
Fresh eyes.
Yeah. I appreciate you coming on and sharing everything with us. Yeah. I'll make sure I drop the links in your website below and everything. And if anyone has any specific question for you, how can they get in touch?
Once again, on our website, you can, if you are interested in finding out more, we do a free complimentary consultation, but I'll give you my personal email. I don't do the complimentary consultations, but since they're your clients, they can email me directly. But if they actually want to learn more about our services, they would actually sign up for complimentary consultation.
Cool.
And take you through the whole thing. So.
Awesome. I appreciate you coming on and sharing everything with us. It was super helpful.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm excited about the community you're building. So
Awesome. Thanks.